Today's guest, we have another ESPN SportsCenter anchor. It is Michael Eaves. Michael, thank you for coming on.
No problem, man. Glad I could do it.
Thank you. I talked to Kevin Connors last week, we kind of mentioned the fact that sports is so hard to even talk about nowadays, and I had the opportunity to interview him and kind of get his backside of his career and his early career in the sports industry. So now I want to talk about yours now. You graduated from the University of Kentucky, and from what I found, I mean, you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Your first job, 7 years at WKYT, WTKY television as well. So if you could take me through your firsthand experience in the sports industry, I would love to know.
Sure. Well, I went to Kentucky in the early 90s, and I was majoring in journalism, and I got a minor in political science. But, at that time, the curriculum at Kentucky didn't have a lot of broadcast classes in it. And so, going into my senior year, I didn't really have that much broadcast experience, maybe one class, and I did some student radio on campus. But the local CBS affiliate, WKYT there in Lexington, had an association with my college. You could get a fellowship. And so I set up an interview with the news director at the time, a few days before classes started my senior year. And I went out to ask for the fellowship. And he said, you can't do the fellowship until you do the unpaid internship. And I was like, all right, fine. And I started to ask for that. And before I could, he said, do you want a job instead? And I'm like, sure. He said, be here Monday. He said, be here Monday morning at 5 a.m. You're going to help with the morning show. And that's literally all he told me. Like, I didn't really know much about television at all in terms of how it's, produced. And I thought I'd maybe like run tapes and scripts and stuff like that, whatever. So I get there Monday morning at 5 a.m. and the news producer for the show in the morning, they work overnight. And typically in a local market, smaller market, they work by themselves and people come in and they help facilitate. And he tells me that I'm going to be producing the local news cut-ins during the CBS National Morning Show, right? So you had a local hour from 6 to 7, and then CBS this morning came on from 7 to 9. And within those 2 hours, there's about 6 or 7 local news cut-ins. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what I'm doing. And so I literally got thrown to the fire in terms of news producing on that first day. And I picked it up pretty quickly, right? And I did it for a couple of years, 2 semesters. And one thing I started doing, because I always wanted to do sports, even though this was a news job, I started putting highlights of the Kentucky basketball games from the night before in the morning cut-ins, right? And it actually became very popular because a lot of people go to sleep, believe it or not, even Kentucky fans at night, because they have to get up and work in the morning. They could catch some of the highlight before going about their day. And then after I graduated that following spring, they gave me a full-time news producing job. So I was producing local newscasts. Every local newscast you've seen, I produced it at some point when I was in Lexington. Eventually, I moved to a full-time sports position and became an anchor. Then I went to Memphis for my second job. Very fortunate to be there because John Calipari came and took over the Memphis Tigers program, so that was a big boost for the city. The Grizzlies moved from Vancouver. That was a big deal. And a Lennox Lewis-Mike Tyson fight happened in Memphis. So a lot of things happened in the short time I was there. And I started doing sidelines on the Grizzlies telecast on Fox Sports Net. Then I eventually moved to LA for a job at the regional there, Fox Sports West. I was there for 10 years. At that time, they did every local team in the market: Lakers, Clippers, Dodgers, Angels, Ducks, Kings, USC, UCLA, Sparks, Galaxy. They had everybody. So I was pretty busy there. And then after about 10 years there, I got kind of tired of the grind. Last couple of years, I was in Los Angeles. I was traveling almost full-time with both the Angels and the Clippers doing their pre- and post-game shows and sidelines. And that's a lot of games. It's a lot of travel. Absolutely. And then Jazeera America came to me as they were starting their network to be their sports anchor studio and not have to travel as much. And I was like, you know what? That's a good idea. So I moved to New York, and then come to find out pretty quickly that network wasn't quite what the Al Jazeera English version is internationally around the world, which is a very good news organization. This one was just not run very well. I was like, this is not working out. And then I had a lot of friends throughout the industry and ran into someone that worked at ESPN and said, yo, you should come work for us. Did a quick little meeting, audition, and I've been here 5 years here in a couple of weeks.
It's amazing how, I've always learned. I'm still very young in this industry. I'm 25. I've kind of bounced around, I was told when I was younger, if you want to get in this industry, when you're young, stay young and get as many jobs as you can and in many different positions you can, so you can
Yep.
kind of learn the industry as a whole. For
Hmm.
you, being 7 years just start out running through all these positions and all these different job titles, first of all, must have been extremely nerve wracking. And two, maybe the biggest thing for your career, because now you know how a show works because you did just about everything for a show.
Yes, there's no question I'm a better anchor and reporter because I was at one time a news producer. So I know what it takes to put together a show, and I know what the expectation is for that particular segment as either reporter live on the scene somewhere or as an anchor running from story to story and bringing in analysts, things of that nature. I know what that entails from both sides, and it's clearly made me better at what I currently do. There's no question about that. But yeah, I agree, and I tell people that all the time. It's so many people start into our industry, they want to be this one thing, and they think if they don't get that particular job, then it's just not going to work out. It's like, no, you got to take any job you can when you're young because one, you need the money. Number two, you need the experience, and you can get experience for a job you want, even if it's not the job you have. I mean, because I was at that television station 5 days a week getting paid. I mean, it's part-time work when I was still in school. When I graduated, I got a full-time job. But I would still go there when I wasn't working and when I wasn't getting paid to learn, to watch, to go out and work on some stuff my own that never made air, that was never going to make air, but it gave me a chance to get in reps and things of that nature that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Now, granted, here in 2020, in terms of technology, people come into the business, they can work on those reps and your fundamentals yourself. I mean, you could do it with your iPhone, right? I mean, you can pick up your phone and put together pretty much a news report, but I needed that access to equipment and technology, so I would go out there on my own. But because I took that other job that wasn't the job I wanted, I eventually got the job I wanted. I mean, think about this, dude. When I started reporting and anchoring sports, it was market 69, okay? Most people who come out of college and get their first anchoring job or first reporting job, it's not market 69. You usually have to go to the triple digits somewhere. So I was very fortunate, but because I was already there, I knew the system, I was an easy hire for them because of the things I did prior to that.
And then when you went over to Fox Sports Net,
Mm-hmm.
covering the Grizzlies and then also covering Clippers and Angels, and you've done a little bit with the Lakers and Dodgers. That's a lot of teams to cover in those amount of years, and to interact with a lot of personalities on and off the court. I would say, I mean, I don't know exactly how many years you were covering all these teams together, but if you can tell me a specific story, I mean, one of your favorites during that time period with Fox Sports West, that you can maybe share some light on us.
Kobe's 81-point game.
Pretty easy.
Yeah, so it was a Sunday night, and they were playing the Raptors, obviously, and it was during NFL football season. At the time, Joel Myers was the voice television for Lakers local broadcast on our network, right? But he was also doing Westwood One radio for the NFL. Mm-hmm. So on that night, he was gone. Bill McDonald, who typically did the sidelines, the pre- and post-game shows, filled in on play-by-play. So then I ended up doing his role, which was the pre- and post-game show, right? And so the game starts Sunday night, Lakers playing the Raptors, no big deal. Kobe has, a good game. That was during a role where he was just scoring at will. So it wasn't out of the ordinary at halftime. And I remember at halftime, after I did what I needed to at halftime, I went up and met my friends at the start of the third quarter who were at the game. And I'm kind of watching the screen and talking to them. And all of a sudden I just see Kobe's points just start to go up. And I was like, yo, man, I got to go. Kobe's doing something stupid. And then we watched what he did. And then I did, the post-game show and just reliving that moment and just watching in awe as he was just going off. Anytime he touched the ball, anywhere over the court, it became a huge story that night. And then the next morning, I'm getting called by Cold Pizza to go on and do a segment with them because I was there for that. Wow. Yeah, exactly. That's how long ago it was. That was one of the cooler things that I've experienced in my career. And I have been very fortunate to cover some cool stuff. I mentioned the Lennox Lewis fight, but I was also in Notre Dame for the Bush Push game, Kobe's 81-point game. I was in Auburn for the Kick 6 game between Auburn and Alabama at the Iron Bowl. But that Kobe thing, because the electricity in Staples Center is different than a lot of arenas you go to, it was just really, really cool to be there. And you felt like, all right, this is the big league, no question about it.
I mean, there's a huge difference between anchoring and being a sideline reporter,
Oh,
because
yeah.
I feel like you need to have some sort of instinct that not many other people maybe won't be able to use or be able to do on the sideline. You got to pick and choose your right time to go talk to somebody, or you're walking around the behind the coaching or the trainer's area trying to listen in. How do you practice being a sideline reporter? I feel like it's just you kind of get your reps in and you get better at it.
I'll say this: I was pretty good at it pretty soon, and there's a reason why. Because I played a lot of basketball growing up. I mean, at one point, I wanted to be a professional basketball player, and basketball was, what I want to do with my life. So I've been a student of the game of basketball for a long time. So if I could just sit down and watch a game, and I can tell you what the storylines are. I can tell you the switches that are working, that aren't working. So that's just a natural talent that I had even before I became a reporter, right? So I leaned on that a lot when I started doing basketball sidelines. Now, granted, even if you don't have that background, it's pretty easy to put together a template, and then all you do is pay attention, right? If you talk to the players and coaches before a game, I don't mean just on game day, but maybe the practice before, whatever, you kind of know what the storylines are. You can talk to the assistant coaches, kind of think about matchups and what they're, have in mind, and you can watch those things and then just ask them about their game plan that they had told you about prior to the game. That's the easiest way to do it, okay? And then as it relates to going to the sidelines, to the huddles, that kind of goes to feel. Now, if you don't have that feel, I would go every single huddle. If you're working for a local team and you have the coach's permission, go every single huddle, and eventually you're going to notice what stands out and what doesn't. Most sideline huddles for an NBA game are boring. Oftentimes, it's not that much X's and O. Most times, it's just reminders of certain things that they talked about prior to. But if you do it enough, you'll understand what's important and what's not. And then once you see something that's really important that feels like a nugget, then you talk to your producer like, hey, I got this. Phil Jackson just said this. We're going to do this. Get me on. I can get it in 30 seconds. That's how you do sideline reporting for a professional team and even major college. You got to have that feel. But if you don't have it naturally, you have to learn how to develop it.
Now, I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong here. With the era where the Shaq and Kobe beef was going on, were you right in the middle of that?
Yeah, so like my first year was their year after their three-peat. Okay, so 2002 to 2003, and I came in middle of that year. Then I was there for the next year when they brought in Karl Malone and Gary Payton. 2004, they went to the finals, lost to the Pistons, and then Shaq was traded that summer. So I was that year and a half. So I wasn't during the three-peat, but when the beef really got serious, when Kobe had his issues in Colorado, and then Shaq was demanding a lot of money from Jerry Buss, I was there for all of that.
God, that must have been insane. I know those two guys.
It was, man. It's like like because you hear all the stories, before I went to LA. I mean, I cover sports and I'm a sports fan, so you hear the talk about it. But until you get there, you don't understand how real it is and how much it affected a lot of the things that team accomplished or didn't accomplish.
Absolutely. So now going to Al Jazeera now, you started in 2013. I mean, you stated even before that it was kind of a weird situation where it didn't seem so professional. You got out just in time before they closed it down in 2016. Did you sense that there was some sort of closing up shop scenario?
Let me say this. I determined that what they told me this job was going to be was not going to be what they told me fairly early on. Okay. So really? I had that one realization. Two, also realized because they asked me if I would consider anchoring news. Right. And I did it because one, I wasn't doing sports, but I didn't want to be off the air. So I just sure, I'll anchor some newscasts here or there. And I did it to say, you know what, just in case there are a lot of people who've made the transition from sports to news, already had the news background. And I even thought, thinking down the road, your retirement job could be being a local news anchor somewhere. So I did it. But I did it more for myself to see if I really wanted to do it and if I could do it long term. Right. And then there was a round of layoffs of staff. And I was like, I'm out. I had my job. I had contract. I wasn't laid off, but they laid off a lot of the staff. And that was just it happened way too early in the beginning of a network for it not to be a huge sign. Yeah. I mean, it was even less than that when the layoffs hit, though. So I was like, yeah, this is not happening. This is not where I want to be. And so I started there in July of 13, and I signed with ESPN in May of 2015.
Jeez, I mean that must have been absolutely bonkers. And then I'm assuming once it ended, you're like, oh, you know what, this kind of makes sense.
Yeah, like I knew it was going down, and I was not going to be on that ship when it went down. I just wasn't going to be me.
Kudos to you, man. I mean, you tell in the future, you can see what happens. So you go to ESPN now. Tell me your first time anchoring SportsCenter. I mean, that's a moment that any kid that has grown up watching ESPN, I mean, that's a moment you will never forget. So I'd love to hear the stories about your first time. If there was
Sure.
like you were sweating and there's all the makeup's running off, you get nervous, whatever.
No,
Tell me about that.
I don't get nervous.
Oh, there you go.
I didn't get nervous the first time I anchored any newscast or any sportscast, even back in Kentucky. I don't know why. I'm not saying I'm special. I just don't. I don't get nervous. Yeah, I'm just like I know what I'm talking about. So, but you know, I played a lot of sports growing up, and I did a lot of public speaking as a kid. So I've never been freaked out about being in front of people. So that didn't trip me out. But also, you have to understand this too. I mean, I was 43 years old, right? 42 when I started at ESPN. So it may have been different if I had started when I was 30 or 32 in terms of the anticipation for it. But because I'd been in LA for 10 years and I kind of moved on in terms of the thought of working at ESPN and SportsCenter, right? I really had. As a young journalist coming up, of course, that's the ultimate job. And it still is the ultimate job. But, you know, I got married again when I was in LA, and I was, you know, I love the lifestyle, living in Los Angeles. So I was like, man, I'm cool. I don't have to work at ESPN to know that I was good enough to work there. So when I actually did get the job, I didn't have those same feelings that a lot of people would have on their first one. I kind of don't really remember my first SportsCenter. Like, I don't remember who I anchored with. I really don't.
Wow,
I know which studio I was in, and I know who the producer was, but I don't remember who my co-anchor was. So it wasn't that big of a deal. I will say this, though. I do remember the first time I anchored SportsCenter in our big studio, the one that for your background there. I do remember that one. That was a midnight show with Max Bretos. Why I remember that one, I don't know, but I do remember that. But as far as like early on and what it was like, it wasn't a big deal to me.
So you've been around for a little 5 years now at ESPN, and you've done just about everything. You've covered, of course, SportsCenter, Muhammad Ali's funeral, Olympics, summer and winter, NFL owners meetings, every kind of big thing that has happened the last 5 years. You've kind of been around it.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate.
Right, and you've also interviewed some unbelievable guests that have come on. I mean, the one that sticks out to me, just because I'm a Yankee fan, it was Aaron Judge. You two were sitting down in studio. I mean, that guy's a absolute monster human being. I'm sure in person he's stupid big. But if you can tell me your best and worst interview and what did you learn from them, even if it's at ESPN or overall in your career?
Whoa.
Because those are the ones you learn from and it makes you better as a reporter and anchor.
Yeah, you're right. I'd say probably my worst ones are ones I don't even remember because they were so long ago, right? I'll say this. I've never had what I would consider to be a bad experience with an interview where it was so awkward that you're like, what the hell just happened? I never quite had one of those. Now, I've had some where I've gone back and like, damn, I should ask that question. Why did I remember that? I've had those moments, and that's sort of the learning thing in terms of your preparation for an interview to be prepared.
Right.
The more prepared you are, the better the interview is going to be. But like the most important thing when doing an interview, and I would even argue that may be more important than the preparation, I'd say 1 and 1A, is listening. You have to pay attention to the answer that the person you're talking to is giving you. Because regardless of how much you prepared and how much and what you wrote down or bullet points and notes or what you want to ask them, if they give you an answer that makes everything on that paper you have useless at this point, you have to be able to follow that storyline with the next question, okay? So I've always been a pretty good listener, and I've always paid attention to what the person I'm talking to is saying. Oftentimes you see someone ask a question, they're waiting for the answer, and in their mind, they're already thinking about the next question. And they could totally miss what someone says and then just go right to the question. No. Pay attention to what that person is saying because they may not have completely answered your question. They may have left something out that you know is important and you could follow up with them. Or they could say something that would totally blow your mind and be like, wait, what? She did what? That was when? And then you go from there. So I've always been a pretty good listener. And I know the value in that. But like some of the interviews I've done, like, granted, I've been doing this for like 27 years now almost, and it's kind of hard to remember all of them. I remember the first time I interviewed Pele, and that was before I came to ESPN. Whoa, I just thought that was serious. Cool.
Yeah.
He's one of the most famous people in the history of the world. Okay. It's like Muhammad Ali and Pele in terms of international recognition are probably the two most recognized athletes around the world for all time. Absolutely. And I got a chance to interview him, and he was gracious. I've met him a couple times since, and part of his family. That was really cool. I'm like, and Jack Nicklaus sitting down with him at the Masters a couple of years ago, and then meeting him for the first time, and he knew my name. It's like, of course I know who you are, Michael. Good to see you. Blah blah blah, like that. Wow. And meeting
that's got to be
Barbara.
Cool.
Yeah, and that was also like one of those moments. I wish my father was still living. I was like, yo, Dad, guess who I met? Or Frank Robinson, or a lot of the people I would meet in LA that I wish I could tell my dad. But there's been so many, dude. It's really hard to kind of narrow it down to one or two.
When a famous person like that recognizes who you are and knows like the work you've done, I feel like that's got to be like one. If you have any nerves, which you said you don't really, for me personally, out the door. When someone like that would say like,
no,
hey, I know you are.
It should actually make you feel more comfortable.
Because you
see what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
It should make you feel. It should give you more confidence in that moment that you are exactly where you're supposed to be, and that includes sitting there talking to Magic Johnson, right? So the first time I met Magic Johnson, and I was a huge Lakers fan growing up. Since I've gotten deeper in my career, I don't really have any professional allegiances to teams in terms of emotion and things like as a fan. Just my alma mater, Kentucky. So I'm doing sidelines at a Lakers game, and Magic is there sitting next to Diane Cannon doing the whole deal. And it was like National AIDS Day or something. And I was going to go talk to him about it and just, whatever. And so we're sitting there in the commercial break prior to coming to the interview. He said, you know what, Michael? I've been watching you for a while. You're really good at what you do. Right? And then all of a sudden, producer, 5, 4, go. I'm like, what? And I was a huge Magic Johnson fan as a kid. He go drop that on me 5 seconds before we go live. That was a trip. But also, like, a couple things. One, people, wherever they live, they watch TV. All right? So if you're on television in Los Angeles, a lot of celebrities watch TV. They're going to know you. Like Jack Nicholson. I walked by him one time and said something to him. He was like, hey, Michael, how you doing? Like, he knew my name without me having to say it, right? But they watch TV. But again, like, I would tell anyone that if someone gives you that type of recognition that they've seen you and they give you a compliment, that should only bolster your confidence that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. They're supposed to be talking to you because they see the level that you've reached and what you're capable of doing.
Now, for your two biggest stories to end off this interview here that you've covered, the Rick Pitino scandal, the most recent one, the third one he's done, and then the Kobe Bryant, his tragic death, and you covering that. For Rick Pitino, that was honestly the first time I recognized you. I was introduced to you on television, I'm kind of young, and I've been a fan of SportsCenter for a long time. But seeing you front and center breaking the story, for one, how did you get the opportunity to break this? And you're being like an Adam Schefter. You scooped up this unbelievable story, and you broke it. And, I was reading old articles the last couple of days, and everyone's saying, according to sources, ESPN, Michael Eaves. That's got to be an unbelievable feeling. But also, being a Kentucky guy, it's got to be almost a horrible feeling, another scandal for Rick Pitino.
Yeah, like it was one of those, we'll talk a little bit more about this when we get to Kobe as well. Like, I wish it didn't happen. Like, I wish Rick wasn't involved in those things that led to his ouster. I wish, Louisville didn't have to go on probation. Like, I'm from Kentucky, and I went to University of Kentucky, but I root for Louisville when they're not playing Kentucky. All of my father's family migrated to Louisville as young adults, so I'd spent a lot of time in Louisville. I want everything in Kentucky to do well because we don't have that much. So whatever we have, I want it to do well.
Right.
But because of my time there and the people that I still knew in that state, that's how I was able to get that information. Now, what was kind of crazy about it, I just happened to be scheduled to be on the air at that time. So I was doing the 10 a.m. SportsCenter back then. It was a 2-hour show, 10 to noon, Monday through Friday I was doing it. And It just happened to be at the same time that Rick Pitino was meeting with his meeting with his coaching staff, and then meeting with the athletic director and the president. So it just happened to fall in the window in which I was working. So I'm still getting this information, trying to find these stories, get everything confirmed through my sources on what we were being led to believe. As I'm also anchoring the show, I'm doing a hit about football over here and something over here. I'm texting on my phone, all these other things, and just happened to be while I was on the air that I found out that he had just told his staff that he had been fired, and I was able to break that live on the air. I mean, timing had a lot to do with it, but it's also about working your sources and just knowing how journalism 101 works.
Did that help your career at ESPN? In a significant way, getting all that coverage? Because I know every place you go, you kind of have to prove yourself in a way. I mean, with your career already, you don't really have to, but I feel like that definitely helped your career at ESPN.
It definitely didn't hurt. That's number one. It didn't hurt, but it showed them that I can do more than just sit down and read a highlight sheet, right? I mean, there's the journalistic chops that I have to be able to do that, but also did the same thing with the Clippers when Blake Griffin broke his hand when he punched the assistant equipment manager in Toronto. Like, I got that story that we ended up running all day on ESPN. I was all Michael Eaves, and some of the stuff when DeAndre Jordan was going to go to the Mavs and decided to go back, I broke some of that story. But even going back to my days in Lexington, I broke 3 stories. At KYT, there was a prospect that was supposed to sign with one of Tubby Smith's teams. He passed out during a high school playoff game in Indiana and died at the hospital. Like, I got that information. I broke the story. I was even the one who called Tubby Smith and told him that one of his recruits had just died that same night.
Wow.
I broke, like, when Bernadette Locke, she used to be assistant coach for Pitino, she ended up getting the women's head coaching job. I broke that story. Antoine Walker, when he decided to leave school and enter the NBA draft, I was the one who broke that story locally. So I've done that at every stop. But to your point, it certainly didn't hurt. But ESPN's a large place, man. Like, we got a lot of people doing a lot of things. And if my name was in the national reporting cycle all day, then clearly it was in that same cycle internally on campus. So, yeah, like, did it absolutely help? Sure. Is it everything? No, but it certainly didn't hurt in any regard.
And to even talk about you were at the right place in the right time. Now, this isn't what exactly I'm trying to say here with the right place and the right time, but you were just working another shift at ESPN, another night doing SportsCenter, and this horrible, tragic death from Kobe Bryant happens. You and Zubin Mehenti did an unbelievable job covering that. For no commercials, nonstop. You guys were getting people coming on. If it was Jalen Rose, if it was, former players, it was people coming on talking about it. But the thing I was really impressed with is that you weren't jumping the gun to break another piece of the story, like the Rick Fox thing, where it was said that Rick Fox was on, but he never was. So that's what TMZ did, and they got a lot of backlash for that. And now they were the ones, personally, I think it was wrong for TMZ to break the story before the Bryant family even finding out. So I find that a little disheartening, a little weird. But take me through that whole day when you and Zubin were working this 5.5-hour coverage.
Yeah, we're supposed to do just an hour. We were doing the 6 o'clock SportsCenter on Sunday evening. It goes, just 6 to 7. And I just gotten to the area, we call it in the screening room where all the highlights come in, but also where we prepare for the evening SportsCenter is in that same room. And I'd been sitting down in my chair for maybe 10 minutes. I just got there. And there was a PA had walked in the room behind me, and I could hear her. She said, "This can't be happening," right? And I turned around, she's kind of looking at her phone. But, it could have been anything. Like, I don't know, she could have been a Justin Bieber fan, and he broke up with his girl. Could have been anything, right? So I didn't really pay it that much attention. And then she continued to, go off in that direction. And then I heard just more and more voices start to gather, and you could just tell something was different. And then I heard someone say Kobe, and that just stood out to me. And our boss just happened to be there that day because someone was sick, so he was filling in on the coordinating producer side. His name's Jack Obringer. And I stand up and I say, "Is Kobe dead?" He said, "We think so. Go get dressed." So I leave screening. I'm going in the hallway over to, so screen is in what we call DC1. Our SportsCenter studio is in DC2 in an adjoining building. And Zubin is in the hallway on the phone, and I stop him like, yo, you might want to go get dressed. We think Kobe's dead. He's like, Kobe Bryant? I'm like, yeah. So I walk over, I change, I get my makeup, and I get to the set. At that time, I had confirmed it my own, a couple sources in LA, and then we got the word that we could go with it. And so from the time that I sat down to the time that we went on the air and I said that Kobe Bryant had died in a helicopter crash, it was about 30 minutes, if that, right? So somewhere around 25, 30 minutes. So there wasn't any preparation time. There was, it was just boom. Because even like, if people didn't talk about like, how we presented the news, like, and how did you prepare for it? There was no preparation for it. Okay. So at that point, you're falling back on your fundamentals and what you've learned, your experience, but also just who you are as a person to understand the tone that is required for such a story. But that entire time that I'm getting makeup and changing clothes, I'm on my phone texting and calling probably 15 or 20 people that I know that could have some information relative to confirming this story. And so once we started, then we were in news gathering mode live on the air because Ramona Shelburne was on her way out to the crash site. We're talking to other people. So we're trying to figure out as much information. We took a couple of press conferences live from LA County officials. So we're in the news gathering mode while also in the disseminating mode, right? So it's like you're doing two things at once and you just don't have time to think about a lot of things. But I tell you what I was not going to do. I was not going to be wrong on anything relative to this story. Like I had heard that Rick Fox was on the chopper. I had heard that it was more than just one of Kobe's daughters on the chopper, but I wasn't going with it if I couldn't confirm it. I wasn't going to do what TMZ did and also what the ABC news reporter did. I was not going to do that. But a couple of reasons. One, it's just wrong.
Yeah.
Two, I knew Kobe, right? I mean, we weren't friends, but we were cool. We had hung out socially before, but we ain't talking on the phone all the time, right? But at the same time, if you have a connection to someone and you understand how big of a deal that is, such a tragedy, the last thing you want to do is get something wrong because you know what? There's a damn good chance that Vanessa was watching television, right? She may have been getting more information from television than she was from LA County officials or anyone who may have been up towards a crash site. And if it wasn't Vanessa, maybe it's Kobe's parents or someone else. So I wasn't about to go on the air and give any information that was erroneous on that particular story. Granted, I don't like doing that on any story, but on something as tragic as that, I was going to err on the side of caution as opposed to trying to be the first one to put it out there.
I mean, personally, it probably could have ruined your career in a sense because, this guy just wants to get the news out. I mean, TMZ looked bad as a whole, but I mean, you were front and center for 5 hours on this. I mean, I imagine if you just said something that was totally false, you could have really jeopardized your own career and also jeopardized the whole company and ESPN making a fool
that's my
out of
thing.
Them, right?
Like, and I care way more about my own personal reputation than I do the reputation of my company, my present employer or past employers. Because even if I leave and go to a different place, I'm still Michael Eaves.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I'm no longer Michael Eaves that works at Fox Sports Net or at ESPN if I go somewhere else. So that brand and that company can move forward if I'm gone. But I'm going to have that stigma on me forever because I got it wrong. I'm not going to be that person. That's not going to happen. Now, as it relates to TMZ, and I think in today's world of media, what people have a hard time understanding is the difference between reporting and being a journalist. Okay?
Okay.
The way you report stories as a journalist is way different than what happens on TMZ, which is basically a social media site that gets news and information and rumor and puts it out there. Right now, I will give them credit. They've been right on a lot of things. They're really good at following police reports and tracking down stuff like that. But it's also a rumor website, right? And it's about people breaking up with their girlfriends and being seen with somebody else at Earth Cafe in LA. That's what TMZ started out, right? So the expectation for them is completely different. But the consumer has to understand what is reporting and what is someone doing journalism. Because if you don't understand that, you group everybody in to this pool of media, and there's a lot of difference inside that pool if you're not paying attention.
Yeah, I mean, personally, my friend told me, go look at TMZ. I'm like, I'm not personally me. I'm not believing a thing until I see a proper publication. If it was like a New York Times breaking it, or if it's a big time news network like yourself at ESPN. That's just me. Because I said, my buddy was like, TMZ has it. And I'm like, I don't believe it. I don't care if they have 200,000 retweets. It could be 200,000 wrong retweets, and then it's the wrong information. But the fact that you had some relationship with Kobe and you did not break during this 5-hour coverage was extremely impressive. That must have been super hard for you not to kind of show too much emotion because you're trying to be professional at the same time.
You don't have time, man. Like, you just don't have – if you are completely focused on what you're doing, you don't have time. Now, once I got home and had a much-deserved glass of bourbon, then sort of the enormity of it all kind of settled with me. And I was like, damn. It just kind of puts you in a bad mood. And just to think, like, how tough it was for his wife and his daughters and his family. And, like, there were a couple of moments during the show that, during the newscast, I should say, that, we got the confirmation on exactly how many people were there. And that hit kind of hard. And they talked about the velocity of they were going potentially and running and crashing into the wall of the mountain. That kind of stuff got to you a little bit. But in that moment, you're so focused, man, like you just don't have that much time to be emotional.
Well, I'll give you a lot of credit. And the last thing, it's going to be a little better, a little more uplifting, a little more fun. I asked Kevin Connors the same thing. I'm going to continue asking every guest I have. Since my podcast is named The End of the Bench, I was a bench guy in college. I played college baseball. I want to make it fun. If you can come up with what is your favorite moment in sports when you see like a bench player come off the bench and make this heroic effort for their team, if it's like your favorite off the bench moment. I know I probably should have did the same thing with Kevin. I should have probably just asked you way beforehand, but he gave me a great one before. It's very specific. I know. It's like
it is very specific, and I'm trying to. And here's what I don't want to. I want to think of one, but I was like, oh, let me not forget about this one in case something happened. Oh, I tell you exactly what it was, and I think it's the best one.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think it'd be hard to find a better one. Grizzlies, Clippers, first round NBA playoffs. Memphis had a 27-point lead, I believe it was, towards the end of the third quarter. And Vinny Del Negro was going to just let it go, pull out the starters. And Chris Paul convinced them to let him stay in, right? Mm-hmm. And Nick Young came off the bench, and he hit, I don't know, maybe 4 threes, I think, in this run that led to the Clippers coming back and not only catching the Grizzlies, but winning the game. And at the time, it was the greatest deficit overcome in a playoff game, I believe. And it was because of what Nick Young had did in that game. It wasn't Blake Griffin. It wasn't DeAndre Jordan. It wasn't some of the other guys other than Chris Paul. It was Nick Young coming out of nowhere and knocking down threes from the corner. I can still see it because I was there. Just the emotional swing in that arena there in Memphis was crazy, and it was all because of Nick Young. Swaggy P was the dude who helped the Clippers win that game, one they had no business winning whatsoever.
Michael, I really appreciate you coming on. It was a pleasure. I always love interviewing guys like you that have a lot of experience in the industry. And I love getting insight on interviews and just their experience overall. So thank you very much for coming on.
No problem, man. Best of luck to you.